I've often thought of having some letterhead made that looks like a law firm. Harris, Sarin, and Dippity. Because that's sort of been the story of my life, which is a part of being ADB, if you recall, which I use as an acronym standing for Attention, Dispersion, Blessed. I went to Baylor Law School after I graduated in August of '62. I love to tell people I went to Baylor Law School. Then I can't help but say ever so briefly. And then I left early to avoid the rush. I said, you know, if I stay here 3 more weeks, they're going to know what I know. If I leave now, they'll always wonder. It just wasn't for me. But because I was on a debate scholarship and had been on Baylor's debate team, because I had interrupted Baylor my junior year to work for LBJ in Washington, everybody said, oh, Harris, you're going into politics. You got to go to law school. So I tried it, again, ever so briefly. So I went down to Galveston when I pulled out because I didn't have the nerve to come home to Fort Worth and face my father. So what little money I had ran out pretty quick on that beach in Galveston. So I came back and faced my father, who immediately said, son, you didn't get that law school. You didn't get that tan in law school. I said, no, sir, you didn't. He said, well, what are you going to do now? You're not going to stay here. I said, I'm going to go to Dallas and go to work for H.L. Hunt. He said, what? I said, I'm going to go to work for H.L. Hunt. He said, what makes you think he's going to hire you? I said, I don't know. He said, have you talked to anybody there? I said, no. He said, what kind of job are you going to look for? I said, don't have a clue. Anyway, Monday morning, I walked into the Mercantile Bank Tower, and I walked into the employment office, and I walked up to the young lady and said, I'm Bill Harris. I just graduated from Baylor, and I'd like to order for Mr. Hunt. She said, well, do you have an appointment with anybody? I said, no, ma'am. Have you mailed anything in here to anybody? I said, no, ma'am. She said, well, we generally do these things by appointment. I said, well, is there anybody here I can talk to? She said, well, just a moment. So she walked over and put her head in the gentleman's office and explained that this young kid out of Baylor was there looking for a job, and he was kind enough to see me. He very quickly looked at my one-page resume and then said, you know, hold on just a minute. He walked down the hall, and he said, and then he came back and said, Bill, he said, I haven't been here but a few months. And he said, Mr. Rothermel down the hall has been here for years. And you because you interrupted Baylor to work for LBJ in Washington, you're kind of a special situation. So would you mind interviewing Mr. Rothermel instead of me? I said, it'd be fine. So I walked into Paul's office. I saw J. Edgar Hoover on the wall, and he explained he had been with the Bureau for 13 years. And we had a wonderful conversation for about 30 minutes. And then he said something that I guess I could have taken umbrage with. He says, you know, he says, you're just the kind of character Mr. Hunt might like. So he called up to Mr. Hunt's office. Mr. Hunt, I just interviewed a young man named Bill Harris who graduated from Baylor and used to work for your buddy LBJ up in Washington. And I didn't know, oh, by the way, I think he goes to your church, First Baptist Church. And I didn't know if you'd have time to meet him or not. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll bring him right up. So he took me into Mr. Hunt's office. He paused at the door, turned his back on Mr. Hunt, headed out, and said, this is the best thing or worst thing I ever happened to you. And then he was gone. Mr. Hunt was sitting behind his desk, reached up, shook my hand, and he started this way. He started looking at my head over here, looking at the top of my head, looking at the side of my head. And I was sitting there thinking, what in the world is the richest man in America doing, studying what little hair I got left? Then he reached down and pulled out his lower left-hand drawer, pulled out 2 brushes, and he started to brush his long, white, gray hair. And he said, young fella, if you'll brush your hair 300 strokes a day, you can still save most of it. Which I thought was an interesting way to start an interview. We had an interesting interview for nearly 20, 25 minutes. And then when it was plain that it was through, he said, don't go out the way you came in, go out this door, meet Carrington and Beeman. So I met John Carrington. He had a Baylor Law degree on the wall. He had heard of my brother, Josh Harris, who had been to Baylor Law School before he took his Air Force commission. That didn't hurt. He said, what kind of job Mr. Hunt talked to you about? I said, you know, we didn't need to talk about a job. He knew that's what I was there for, but he never did talk about what kind of a job. He just told me to meet you and Beeman. Who's Beeman? He said, that's a senior vice president of Hunt Oil Company. First hallway to the right, first door on the right. So I walked in. As he was walking out, a very distinguished looking older gentleman who said, yes, I'm William Beeman. He told you to meet me? Okay, what sort of a job were you talking about, Mr. Harris? I said, well, we didn't really talk about the job. Oh, well, you've met me. And then he was through. So I stuck my head back in Carrington's office and I said, Mr. Carrington, one more thing. The last thing Mr. Hunt said was, next time you're in Dallas, come to see me. I said, I'm coming back to Dallas in the morning because I'm going to try to interview U.S. Steel. They have a trainee program. I said, well, don't you think he's just being nice? He said, oh, we don't know. Just do what he says. That's what we do. So the next morning about 8:30, I stuck my head back in Carrington's office. And I said, Mr. Carrington, I said, can't you just tell Mr. Hunt I came by? He said, no, that's not how it works. He said, but it doesn't matter, Bill. He said, you know where you started over in the personnel office? I said, yes, sir. He said, your office is over there, and you're going to share a secretary with Mr. Rothendahl. And we'll call you when we need you. So I went over there, walked back into Rothendahl's office, and I said, it sounds to me like I got the job. He said, well, that's what I heard. I said, do you know what my job? He said, I don't have a clue. I said, well, what should I do? He said, well, I would close both of the doors to my private office, and I might kick my shoes off and loosen my tie and put my coat on the rack back there and throw your feet up there on that air conditioner and watch them build that Republic Bank Tower. That's how I started my first day with the man that J. Paul Getty called the richest man in America. And it was an exciting odyssey, which I can tell you more. I've made long lists of small stories within the story, slice of life stories about what it's like working for the richest man in America. And we'll do that next time. Thank you. God bless.